Super Mario, one of the most influential video game franchises of all time. He's ventured across grassy hills and mounted fiery volcanoes. He's climbed over icy mountains and swam through tumultuous seas. Hell, he's even explored space and the cosmos just to save a ditzy and frankly unappreciative princess. I've been a Mario fan since I could hold a controller, and despite the hardships Nintendo has run into over the years, our favorite plumber is still hopping and bounding to this very day, a smile perpetually affixed to his jolly face. I couldn't possibly call myself a reviewer without taking some kind of look at the original classics that started it all, but there's only one problem. Everybody and their brother has reviewed classic Mario, and no self-respecting gamer hasn't at least given them a try at one point in their life. But then I remembered something. I didn't grow up with these games the way most people did. I grew up in a family that never experienced the originals on NES or Super Nintendo. To my parents, it never quite made sense to buy games for consoles they thought were obsolete. But luckily for me, from 1999 to 2003, Nintendo re-released the classic Mario games for the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance. Whenever anyone talks about the original Mario classics, they always seem to be referring to the NES and Super NES originals. And nobody ever seems to talk about these portable versions. That's why I've decided to give them the proper showcase they deserve, while comparing them to the other versions where applicable. To that end, I've decided to introduce a new segment, Remake or Re-Break, where I compare originals and their remakes side by side to see which is stronger and why. I'd also like to talk about Super Mario All-Stars, but let's save that for the end. In the meanwhile, this is Classic Mario, Remake or Re-Break. In the early 80s, the gaming industry was at a standstill. After some rather foolish decisions by such companies as Coleco, Atari, and Mattel, the market had become oversaturated with underdeveloped content, and consequently caused a stock crash in the United States. From 1983 to 1985, a doldrums of content quietly whistled through the industry. But things changed in 1985 when a former trading card company called Nintendo released a new video game console in North America, the Nintendo Entertainment System. And one of its launch titles, Super Mario Bros., revolutionized the industry, whereas older games on systems such as the Atari 2600 focused on high scores and often only had one screen, Super Mario Bros. Offered the player a storyline with an epic quest and a thrilling conclusion. It's commonplace now, but back then, gamers hadn't seen anything like it. The importance of Super Mario Bros. In revitalizing and revolutionizing the game industry could not be overstated. Many gaming publications cite Super Mario Bros. As the best game of all time for this very reason. While I wouldn't agree to that statement, I can't deny just how influential this game has been on everything video game related. Let's fast forward about 14 years to March 1999. The Game Boy Color was Nintendo's new flagship handheld, replacing the original black and white brick, and was essentially an NES that you could carry around in your pocket. Nintendo flaunted the new handheld's capabilities by porting a beloved classic, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. I have a confession to make. There's another reason why I wanted to review this game. Super Mario Bros. DX is actually the very first video game I ever played. Yeah, thinking back, I can't believe just how lucky I was that it ended up being this game and not something like Halo Combat Evolved. The story is as simple as it gets. The Mushroom Kingdom is a peaceful land of mushroom people named Toads, the ruler of which is the Mushroom King. But one day, an evil turtle sorcerer named Bowser, the king of the Koopa tribe, axes off the king and kidnaps his daughter Princess Toadstool. Bowser then turns all the toads into bricks and blocks. The Mario brothers, Mario and Luigi, are a pair of plumbers from Brooklyn who are magically sucked in from the real world, and are the only ones who can rescue Princess Toadstool and restore peace to the Mushroom Kingdom. Looking back, it's amazing just how much of this game's story has been retconned. Mario and Luigi aren't from Brooklyn anymore. Bowser doesn't have magic powers, as far as I know. The Mushroom King is never mentioned again, and Princess Toadstool's name has since been changed to Princess Peach, a change that nobody but me seems to have noticed. As I've mentioned before, I'm going to spend most of the review looking at the remake, as most people are already familiar with the original to some extent or another. Super Mario Bros. DX actually has quite a few modes to try out, First, there's the original 1985 mode, which is essentially Mario as you played it back on the NES. The graphics are copied pixel for pixel from the original, though there are a few minor changes. The mushroom retainers now hop around in place, and the water and lava actually moves instead of just being boring static images. Little touches like that help boost up the presentation from the original. The level design hasn't really been changed at all, so you're not missing out on anything new. In this version, in the single player mode, you can play as both Mario and Luigi, though the difference is only cosmetic. The color of Luigi's overalls has also been changed from the original to match his later appearances. Mario's moveset isn't all that complicated. You can run and jump, go down pipes, and climb up vines. Mario really isn't all that durable, however. One hit and you're dead. But luckily there are a few power-ups at your disposal, which not only give you new abilities, but also double as a health bar of sorts. Scattered throughout the levels are question blocks, which you can bash with your head to find goodies. Some of them contain super mushrooms, which allow Mario to double in size. As Super Mario, you can take one extra hit and break brick blocks. If you're Super Mario and you hit a block containing a mushroom, you'll find a fire flower, which allows you to throw fireballs at enemies to kill them instantly. What's kind of weird is that if you're hit as Super Mario after uncovering a fire flower, you only become Super Mario and not Fire Mario. The same thing happens in the original, so it's odd that this wasn't fixed. Finally, we have the Starman, which allows Mario to become invincible for a brief period of time. They're usually well hidden and pretty rare, so grab them if you see them. The enemies are among the most classic in video game history. Goombas are the basic grunt troop. Jump on them and they die instantly. Koopa Troopas are Bowser's main subjects. They mostly walk back and forth, but the winged Paratroopas can jump around. If you jump on them, they'll retract into their shells, but you can kick into other enemies. There are also Buzzy Beetles, which are really more turtle than they are beetle. They're pretty much Koopas, except you can't kill them with fireballs. Lurking in pipes are piranha plants, which like to hide themselves when you get close. Strangely, you can go into pipes that they're hiding in without getting hurt. We also have Hammer Brothers, which are members of Bowser's elite guard. They throw hammers at you in nice telegraphed arcs. They're probably the most annoying enemies in the game. It's pretty difficult to jump on them without getting yourself hit by a hammer, so I recommend bashing them from underneath. Underwater, you can find Cheep Cheeps, which are just basic fish that swim around. Bloopers are squid that faff about in the water. If you stand on the ground, they'll never hit you. In the sky, you'll find Lakitus, which are Koopas that ride around in clouds. They throw spiky eggs at you, which unravel into spinies upon hitting the ground. These guys are basically Buzzy Beetles, except you can't jump on them. The game's not exactly the longest in the series. If you know what you're doing, you can beat the whole thing in about half an hour. But if you're not very experienced, it could take you an hour or two. One of the things I've always disliked about the original is that all you get are 3 lives and no continues. If you get a game over, then fuck you have to start all over from the beginning. There was a continue code that let you continue from the beginning of the last world you were on, but that's technically cheating, so beating the game with it doesn't exactly count. Because this game pretty much invented the side-scrolling genre as we know it, I try not to let the lack of continues affect my opinion of the NES version too much, but it's something that I dislike about the original nonetheless. The remake, on the other hand, starts you up with 5 lives and offers a much welcome save feature. The game lets you save at any time and continue from the level you left off on. To those who have mastered the original, it may sound like it makes the game way too freaking easy, but for beginners, like 5-year-old me for example, it was perfect, and I think that that's the remake's greatest strength. It's far more accessible to newcomers than the original could ever be. The game is 32 levels long, split into 8 worlds of 4 levels each. The first few levels take place in grassy plains, underground, or underwater. In comparison to later installments, the level design is pretty vanilla. The stages don't have much exploration to them and they all look pretty much the same, with all the same bushes, trees, and wacky brickwork. The underground and underwater stages mix things up a little, but the underground stages are pretty much only different cosmetically, and the underwater stages are just kind of dull. Every 4 levels you go into one of the Koopa tribe's castles, which are the only levels that really have any stage-specific gimmicks, with fire sticks and elevator platforms keeping things fresh. Castle 4-4 has this gimmick where you need to jump over and under platforms in order to proceed with the game. In the original, you were on your own to figure out how the fuck you were supposed to get through here, but the DX port gives you a little chime to let you know if you're going the right way. Some of the castle levels repeat though. Castle 6-4 is the same as Castle 1-4, the same goes for Castle 2-4 and Castle 5-4, it's a total rehash. Since this was the first game in the series, it makes sense that the level design wouldn't be too terribly special. For a game of this length, it makes things drag out a little. Some more intentionality in the level design would have made things better. For those who don't want to bother with all 32 levels, there are warp zones hidden in a few levels that allow you to skip past chunks of the game. They were pretty much mandatory in the original unless you were exceptionally skilled, and fans of the original will be glad to see that they are just as useful here. The original soundtrack is present, though there are a few new tracks here and there. The overworld theme is pretty much as classic as video game music gets. Hell, I hear non-gamers humming it every once in a while. The underground theme is kind of repetitive, but atmospheric. The underwater theme is probably the best track in the game, but these levels aren't exactly plentiful. The castle theme, on the other hand, is just repetitive and dull. Overall, it's a memorable soundtrack, but it's nothing too terribly special. In each castle, you fight a Bowser clone. It doesn't really do much besides walk back and forth, shoot fireballs, and occasionally jump. You can't jump on Bowser, so you either have to pelt them with fireballs or run under him and grab the axe to topple him into the lava. After that, you save a mushroom retainer, or Toad, from Bowser's grasp, who taunts you about how you haven't actually saved the princess yet. Come on, I'm working on it, asshole! I don't see you doing anything! I also like the double deuce thing that's going on. Like, seriously, look at this sprite up close and you'll be pleasantly surprised. But I do have one more question. What the hell is this Toad doing here if they all got turned into bricks and blocks? The first 4 or 5 worlds are pretty simple, but around World 6, the game starts throwing a bunch of Hammer Brothers and Lakitus at you. Around Castle 6, Bowser also starts throwing hammers in addition to the fireballs, which can be pretty tough to dodge. World 8 is, and rightly so, the toughest part of the game. Lakitos and Hammer Brothers come after you in droves, and some of the jumps can just be outrageous. Especially this one. I hope you know that you can run over small holes or you're pretty much fucked. The game also seems to just flat out stop giving you mushrooms and fire flowers somewhere around World 6. And the mid-level checkpoints just cease to exist. The final castle is going to guzzle up your lives rather quickly unless if you follow these steps. In World 8-3, you want to carefully take care of these Hammer Brothers and bump around until you find a rather well hidden mushroom. When you see another pair of Hammer Brothers, do the same and you should find a fire flower right here. From there on, use the fire flower to clear out the remaining Hammer Brothers and reach the end of the level. In the castle, you have to be damn sure that you don't get hit or you're not winning the game. This level's also kind of labyrinthine, requiring you to duck in and out of pipes to find your way forward. If you can hold on to your fire flower until the end, you should be able to take care of this infamous last Hammer Brother without any problem. Then you can either chuck a couple fireballs at Bowser or just run under him and win the game. The ending's kind of anticlimactic, but the remake at least gives you a snazzy little medal and a cool picture. After beating the game, you can play a harder version where the enemies move faster and all the Goombas are replaced with Buzzy Beetles. Nothing much else is different, and it's honestly not really all that much harder, but it's nice to see it return from the original. All in all, the original 1985 mode is a faithful reproduction of the original game that steps things up in presentation and accessibility, while also recreating all the old features you know and love. I'd call it a perfect remake, but it suffers from one damning flaw: screen crunch. For those of you who haven't experienced the remake, try to imagine playing the NES game, except with the screen cramped into a teeny tiny 1:1 aspect ratio. Since you can't really see where you're going, enemies will blindside you all the time, and because of that, this version requires a lot more memorization than the NES original. Thankfully, you can press up, down, and select to move the camera around and improve your visibility somewhat, but while you're doing that, enemies and stage hazards have time to make their move. Granted, this problem only really exists because of the hardware limitations of the Game Boy Color, but since we're comparing the two versions side by side, I can safely say that the NES version plays a lot smoother due to its better visibility. All of that, and we still haven't touched the other modes yet. Challenge mode allows you to replay any level that you've already cleared. Each level has 5 red coins and a Yoshi egg hidden in them, along with a special score cap to clear. This mode is a fun way to re-experience the levels you know and love, but ultimately it's not necessarily my cup of tea. If you're a completionist, you'll probably have a blast with it, but me? I can never seem to clear the score cap, no matter how fast I clear the level or how many enemies or bricks I bash. It's a nice addition, but odds are that only completionists will really get that much out of it. The multiplayer mode requires 2 Game Boy Colors and 2 copies of the game, which I don't happen to possess. Sorry. Luckily for me, the next mode, You vs. Boo, is pretty much a single-player version of the multiplayer mode. You race through 8 stages while trying to beat Boo to the finish line. If you can beat the Boo fast enough, you'll unlock tougher Boos to race in that stage. It's a pretty fun mode that really tests your skills with the controls. There's not too much else to say about it. There's also this album, which unlocks pictures as you progress through the game. In the bottom, we have the toy box, which has a variety of goodies to look at. First, there's a calendar. Back in 1999, in the age before smartphones, it was probably kind of cool to have a digital calendar in your pocket that you could carry around. But now, it's pretty freaking pointless. You also have this fortune teller, which I spent way too much of my childhood playing around with. For the most part, it's just a pointless minigame, but if you can get a Toadstool card, it actually allows you to start up the original 1985 mode with 10 lives instead of 5. So if you thought the game couldn't get any easier, then guess what, you were wrong. The Yoshi head shows you where you can find all the different Yoshi eggs in the challenge mode. Nowadays we just use game facts for this sort of thing, but it's a nice thought from the developers nonetheless. The weird hole in the corner takes you to Princess Toadstool and her 7 mushroom retainers. Here, if you happen to be one of the 5 people in the universe to own a Game Boy printer, you can print off a bunch of pictures and banners. You can also customize the little screen that pops up at the beginning of the game. If you enjoy making Mario and friends say a bunch of ridiculous phrases, then this mode is for you. And finally, we have this Luigi head, which shows up once you get a high score. What's here? A full remake of Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, of course. For those unfamiliar, Lost Levels was the original Super Mario Bros. 2, the original version of which was only released in Japan. I like to refer to it as the official Super Mario Bros. ROM hack from Nintendo. The graphics are pretty much the same as before, only with minor differences, and the soundtrack is exactly the same. And it's also easily the hardest Mario game ever made. It features flying bloopers, backwards warp zones, underwater Koopas, and poison mushrooms. Seriously, this game is so hard that the localization team of Nintendo of America refused to translate it out of fear that it might damage the series' reputation. I've beaten it a couple of times myself, both the Famicom version and the All-Stars port, and while it can be fun in that Super Meat Boy or Ninja Gaiden kind of way, I can easily call it one of my least favorite Mario games. One thing that I can compliment, however, is the level design. It's certainly more interesting than the first game and requires more thought to progress. There are also more gimmicks, like the green trampolines that launch you high into the sky, as well as wind that pushes you forward. While all this is nice and all, it's so ridiculously freaking difficult that it is impossible to beat unless you either use the Koopa Shell 1-up trick, or you just happen to be a Mario expert. It is not a game for the faint of heart, and I recommend it only to hardcore Mario enthusiasts. So how's the Game Boy Color version? Well, if you thought it was hard before, try playing it with this port's ridiculous screen crunch. Seriously, it's practically unplayable. Thankfully, it at least adds a save feature, as well as the ability to continue from the last level you died on, but for me, that's really not enough for me to forgive this poor visibility. So, remake or re-break, what's the verdict? Super Mario Bros. DX features all the content of the original, plus improved presentation, extra modes, a save feature, and tons of content for a little GVC cartridge. And while all this is nice and all, I personally can't get past the screen crunch. Despite the fact that this version is technically easier than the original due to the extra lives and the save feature, I find myself dying more than ever. The extra content is nice and all, but if the game doesn't play as well, then I don't think it tops the NES version. But that being said, I still think it's worth checking out, especially if you mastered the original and want to experience it in a new way. And if you can get over the screen crunch, you'll probably enjoy this version even more, especially if you're a newcomer or a completionist. So, all in all, I'd have to call this one a remake. It may not top the original, but it's still a great way to re-experience the first Mario game. But if you're just trying to replace your lost NES cartridge, you're better off just getting a new card off of eBay or Amazon or downloading it off the Virtual Console. What about the game itself? Well, if we ignore just how influential this title was in the industry and just look at the game purely on its own merits, then Super Mario Bros. Is a good, but not great first installment. It's aged pretty well for the most part, but the lack of continues in the original is an archaic design choice that kinda turns me off. The level design also feels a tad simplistic and underthought in comparison to later titles. Some might think that that's an unfair comparison, which is somewhat true, but as far as this first game's placement in the series hierarchy, I don't necessarily find it to be one of the best. If you're a newcomer to the series, this game isn't necessarily the best place to get an impression of 2D Mario. You're better off playing Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario World, or even New Super Mario Bros. Yeah, I just said that. The games may not be as revolutionary, but the level design is still tons more interesting. Speaking of which, as promised, I'm going to be checking out the remaining 4 remakes as well. Join me next time when I take a look at another of my childhood games, Super Mario Advance for the Game Boy Advance. Until then, I'm ExoParadigmGamer, and I hope you enjoyed the review.